The dying screams of Earth echoed across subspace as Zephyra Kane pressed her palm against the viewport of the refugee transport Wandering Hope. Behind them, humanity's birth world cracked like an eggshell under the relentless bombardment of the hegemony fleet. Crimson fissures spread across continents while oceans boiled into steam, and somewhere in that inferno lay the ashes of 8 billion souls who hadn't made it to the evacuation ships. "Commander Kane, we're receiving priority transmissions from the other vessels," reported Thaddeus Vex, his weathered face illuminated by the pale glow of tactical displays. The former Earth Defense Admiral had aged decades in the past 72 hours, his steel-gray hair now disheveled and his uniform stained with the blood of the final defense. 67 ships total. Roughly 200,000 survivors. Zephyr's reflection in the viewport showed hollow cheeks and eyes that had seen too much. At 34, she had been Earth's youngest chief engineer for the Deep Space Initiative, designing vessels capable of reaching distant stars. Now she was simply another refugee, watching her species' extinction play out in real time. Signal strength from the Defiance end? "Captain Crow's ship took heavy damage during the breakout," Vex replied, his fingers dancing across holographic interfaces. But Seraphina's keeping them together. Always was stubborn as neutronium. The mention of her old academy roommate brought a ghost of a smile to Zephyra's lips. Seraphina Crow had become Earth's most gifted diplomat, capable of negotiating with species whose thought patterns defied human comprehension. If anyone could convince the galaxy to shelter Earth's refugees, it would be her. "Ma'am, you need to see this," called Orion Blackthorne from the engineering station. The lanky shipwright's fingers trembled as he pulled up a deep space scan. "The hegemony fleet, they're not stopping with Earth." Zephyra moved to his console, her heart sinking as she read the tactical data. Dozens of triangular dreadnoughts were breaking off from Earth's corpse, their trajectories clearly marked. "They're hunting the colony worlds. Kepler 442b, Proxima Centauri b, Wolf 1061c. All of them," Vex confirmed grimly. "Every human settlement within 50 light-years. They mean to erase us completely." The bridge fell silent except for the hum of life support systems. Through the viewport, the refugee fleet drifted like scattered seeds on the cosmic wind, their running lights creating a constellation of human desperation. These weren't warships or exploration vessels, but civilian transports, mining haulers and converted cargo freighters hastily retrofitted with jump drives. They carried teachers and children, artists and farmers, the elderly and the brilliant, the living remnant of humanity's greatest civilization. "Why?" whispered Lyra Nightingale from the pilot station, her young voice cracking with grief. The former shuttle pilot had evacuated 3 schools during Earth's final hours, cramming terrified children into cargo holds designed for freight. "We never threatened them. Earth was just beginning to reach out to the galaxy." Zephyra had asked herself the same question as Earth's defenses crumbled. The hegemony had offered no ultimatums, no demands for surrender. Their warships had simply appeared in Earth's solar system and begun methodically destroying everything that carried human DNA. When the desperate governments attempted to communicate, the aliens had responded with antimatter torpedoes. "Perhaps that's exactly why," suggested Cassius Ironwood, the weapons designer whose theoretical work had never been tested in actual combat. His dark eyes reflected the burning planet behind them. "Maybe the hegemony sees potential in humanity that even we don't recognize." Vex snorted. "Potential? We couldn't even scratch their shields." "Our conventional weapons couldn't," Cassius corrected. "But I've been analyzing their ship compositions during the battle. Their technology is advanced, yes, but it follows predictable patterns. They've grown complacent, relying on overwhelming force rather than innovation." Zephyra felt something stir within her chest. Not hope, exactly, but the shadow of possibility. She had spent her career pushing the boundaries of human engineering, designing ships that could survive the crushing depths of space and the violent fury of stellar phenomena. Perhaps there was something uniquely human about their approach to problem-solving, something that the galaxy's ancient empires had forgotten. "Set course for the neutral zone," she ordered, her voice gaining strength. "Send a coded message to all ships. We're not just running anymore." As the refugee fleet aligned their trajectories and prepared to jump into the unknown, Zephyra stared one last time at Earth's funeral pyre. The hegemony had destroyed their world, scattered their people, and condemned their species to extinction. But they had also made a critical error. They had left the humans alive long enough to learn, to adapt, and to remember. In their arrogance, the aliens had created something far more dangerous than a conquered world. They had created a people with nothing left to lose. 6 months after Earth's death, The refugee fleet hung in the shadow of a rogue planet drifting between stars. The Wandering Hope had become the unofficial flagship of humanity's remnant, its cargo bays converted into workshops where desperate innovation met raw necessity. Zephyra moved through the corridors like a ghost, her engineering blues stained with coolant and her hands perpetually blackened from working with jury-rigged equipment. "The power couplings on Deck 7 are failing again," reported Orion Blackthorne as he emerged from a maintenance tunnel, his tall frame folded in half to navigate the cramped space. Oil streaked his angular face, and his sandy hair hung in exhausted tangles. "We're losing efficiency in the hydroponics bay." Zephyra nodded absently, her attention focused on the holographic schematics floating before her. The design that had consumed her every waking moment for weeks finally began to take shape, a vessel unlike anything humanity had ever conceived. Where human ships had always followed function over form aesthetics, this new craft embodied something altogether different, predatory elegance married to devastating purpose. "The quantum resonance chambers are the key," she murmured, her fingers tracing energy flow patterns through the ghostly blueprint. "If we can harness the natural fluctuations in subspace, we won't need the massive power cores that make conventional warships so vulnerable." Thaddeus Vex approached from the tactical station, his admirals bearing intact despite their reduced circumstances. "Commander, Captain Crow is requesting your presence in the conference room. We've received interesting intelligence from our scouts." Zephyra looked up from her work to find Vex's expression carefully neutral, which usually meant bad news. She sealed the holographic files and made her way to the converted storage room that served as their strategic center. Inside, she found Seraphina Crow hunched over a communications array, her diplomat's poise showing cracks of exhaustion. "Zeph, thank the void you're here," Seraphina said without looking up. Her auburn hair, once perfectly styled for state functions, now hung in a practical braid. "I've been in contact with refugees from other species. The hegemony's expansion isn't random. They're systematically eliminating any civilization that shows rapid technological development." "How many others?" Zephyra asked, settling into a salvaged chair. 17 species in the past decade," Seraphina replied, her green eyes haunted. "The Corinthians, who developed faster-than-light communication. The Vorthack Collective, who created self-repairing hull materials. The Stellaris Commonwealth, who achieved breakthrough propulsion technology." She paused, her voice dropping to a whisper. "All extinct now." Lyra Nightingale drifted into the room, her pilot's instincts having guided her through the labyrinthine passages of the converted transport. At 26, she had become their primary scout, taking small ships deep into contested space to gather intelligence. "I've been monitoring hegemony communications," she reported, her voice tight with suppressed anger. "They call us evolutionary anomalies. Apparently, humanity's rate of technological advancement was deemed an existential threat to galactic stability." Cassius Ironwood looked up from the weapon designs he'd been sketching. "They destroyed entire civilizations out of fear?" "Not fear," Vex corrected grimly. "Cold calculation. The hegemony has maintained galactic dominance for millennia by ensuring that no species develops beyond their predetermined thresholds. They're gardeners and we're weeds." Zephyra felt familiar fire kindle in her chest. "Then they've made a fundamental miscalculation. They've assumed that destroying our infrastructure would cripple our development. But humans don't just adapt to impossible circumstances, we thrive in them." She activated the holographic projector, and her revolutionary ship design materialized in the center of the room. The vessel was sleek and angular, its hull composed of interlocking plates that could shift configuration in real time. Unlike the bulky dreadnoughts favored by established powers, this craft embodied speed and lethality in equal measure. "This is what we're going to build," Zephyra announced. "Not one ship but hundreds. The hegemony expects us to follow conventional paradigms, to scale up existing technology until we match their firepower. Instead, we're going to rewrite the rules of space combat entirely." Orion studied the blueprints with growing excitement. "These quantum resonance chambers, if they work as theorized, we could achieve thrust-to-mass ratios that should be physically impossible. And the modular hull design would allow rapid reconfiguration between stealth, speed, and combat modes. The power requirements alone should make this impractical," Cassius noted, though his tone carried admiration rather than criticism. "But if you're drawing energy directly from subspace fluctuations, we'd have effectively unlimited power," Seraphina finished, her diplomatic mind immediately grasping the strategic implications. "Ships that could outrun anything while carrying weapons capable of devastating much larger vessels." Zephyra nodded. The hegemony crushed us because they fought the war they expected. Massive fleets engaging in traditional battle lines. But war isn't about having the biggest hammer. It's about striking where your enemy least expects it, with force they can't comprehend. Through the viewport, the other refugee ships drifted in the eternal darkness, their running lights like stars in the void. Each vessel carried the remnants of human culture, knowledge, and determination. The hegemony had intended to scatter them like cosmic dust, but instead they had created something unprecedented. Our entire species united by loss and driven by the absolute necessity of survival. How long until the first prototype? Vex asked. Zephyr's smile held no warmth, only the promise of retribution. 3 months. And then we begin teaching the galaxy what happens when you try to exterminate an evolutionary anomaly. The prototype Shadowhawk drifted silently through the debris field that had once been the Altair mining colony, its revolutionary hull configuration cycling through adaptive camouflage patterns. Zephyra watched through the main viewport as Lyra Nightingale piloted their first warship with the grace of a dancer and the precision of a surgeon, her hands moving across controls that responded to thought as much as touch. Hegemony Patrol bearing 27 Mark IV, reported Cassius Ironwood from the weapons station. His theoretical designs had been transformed into reality over months of desperate innovation, resulting in armament systems that defied conventional understanding. 3 frigates in standard formation, sweeping for survivors. Thaddeus Vex leaned forward in the tactical officer's position, his weathered features illuminated by targeting displays. This is it, people. First test of our capabilities against live targets. Remember, we're not just fighting for ourselves, we're proving that humanity refuses to die quietly. The Shadowhawk represented everything Zephyra had dreamed and more. Its quantum resonance chambers hummed with barely contained energy, drawing power from the fundamental structure of spacetime itself. The modular hull plates shifted constantly, optimizing the ship's configuration for each microsecond of flight. Where conventional vessels were limited by the physics of their construction, the Shadowhawk bent those limitations to its will. They haven't detected us yet, Lyra whispered from the pilot station, her fingers dancing across haptic interfaces. The adaptive hull is cycling through 17 different stealth configurations per second. To their sensors, we're just another piece of debris. Serafina Crow's voice crackled over the comm system from the refugee fleet's hiding position 3 AU away. Zephyra, I'm monitoring hegemony communications. They're discussing pest control operations in this system. They know we're here somewhere. Zephyra felt cold rage settle in her chest. The Altair colony had housed 12,000 civilian miners and their families, dedicated to extracting rare metals for humanity's expansion into space. The hegemony had ended their lives with casual efficiency, reducing homes and dreams to radioactive debris. Orion, status on the Quantum Lance Array? She asked. Charging to optimal levels, came the reply from the engineering station. Orion Blackthorn's lanky frame was hunched over control systems that seemed to respond to his will, his natural affinity for mechanical systems enhanced by their revolutionary human-machine interfaces. Power flow is stable at 800% of conventional maximum. The resonance chambers are actually improving efficiency under combat load. Cassius looked up from his weapon controls with something approaching disbelief. Commander, the targeting computers are showing solutions that shouldn't be possible. The quantum lance can actually bend its trajectory through subspace. We can hit targets around corners, through obstacles, even through the warped space near gravity wells. Time to teach these bastards about human ingenuity, Vex growled. Lyra, bring us to attack position. The Shadowhawk moved like liquid mercury through the debris field, its form constantly shifting as the hull plates reconfigured for optimal stealth and maneuverability. The hegemony frigates continued their methodical sweep, their crews completely unaware that death stalked them through the cosmic graveyard they had created. Target acquisition, Cassius reported, his voice tight with concentration. Lead frigate, shields at maximum, weapons hot. They're scanning the debris field with active sensors. Perfect, Zephyr breathed. Fire. The quantum lance array discharged with a sound like reality tearing. Instead of the brilliant energy beams favored by conventional weapons, the quantum lance manifested as a distortion in spacetime itself, a writhing serpent of pure physics that ignored shields, armor, and defensive fields. The beam carved through the lead frigate's hull as if it were paper, emerging from the far side to strike the second vessel before looping back through subspace to devastate the third. In less than 4 seconds, 3 hegemony warships ceased to exist as functional vessels. Their hulls cracked open like eggshells, atmosphere and debris venting into the void while emergency beacons screamed their final distress calls. "Impossible," Lyra whispered, staring at the tactical display. "We just destroyed 3 frigates with a single shot." "Not impossible," Zephyr corrected, her voice carrying grim satisfaction. "Just evolutionary. The hegemony's technology assumes that energy follows predictable paths, that weapons obey conventional physics. They've never faced an opponent who could rewrite the fundamental rules of engagement." Thaddeus Vex was studying the tactical aftermath with the eye of a career military officer. Communication intercepts show complete confusion in their command structure. They don't understand what just happened. Their ships simply stopped functioning. "Good," Serafina's voice came over the comm. "Let them report to their superiors that humanity possesses weapons beyond their comprehension. Fear is the first step toward respect." But Zephyr felt no satisfaction as she watched the debris of their first victory drift through space. Each piece of wreckage represented beings who had followed orders, who had believed they were serving some greater purpose. The hegemony's foot soldiers were as much victims of their empire's policies as humanity had been. "Take us back to the fleet," she ordered quietly. "We have work to do." As the Shadowhawk slipped away from the battle site, its hull already adapting to deep space camouflage, Zephyr stared out at the stars. Somewhere in that vast darkness, the hegemony's war machine continued its methodical expansion, crushing civilizations that dared to evolve beyond prescribed limits. But now they faced something unprecedented. Not just another species to be exterminated, but an evolutionary force that refused to be contained. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity's greatest strength had never been their technology or their weapons. It was their absolute refusal to accept extinction as inevitable. 9 months after the Shadowhawk's first kill, the hidden shipyards of New Geneva hummed with impossible activity. Carved into the ice-covered surface of a rogue moon drifting between stars, the facility had grown from desperate necessity into humanity's greatest achievement. Zephyr moved through the construction bays like a conductor directing a symphony of controlled chaos, watching as her designs took shape in defiance of conventional physics. "Production Line 7 has completed its 15th hull this week," reported Orion Blackthorne, his once lanky frame now muscled from months of hands-on construction work. The young engineer had become their master shipwright, capable of overseeing dozens of simultaneous builds while maintaining quality that exceeded their most optimistic projections. The quantum resonance chambers are integrating flawlessly with the adaptive hull systems. Zephyr nodded, her attention focused on the tactical hologram displaying their growing fleet. 67 operational warships now bore the distinctive angular lines of human design, each one unique in its specific configuration but united by the revolutionary principles that made them possible. They had designated them the Reaper class, a name that carried grim promise. "Commander Kane, priority transmission from Scout Group Theta," announced Lyra Nightingale as she approached from the communications center. The young pilot had evolved into their primary intelligence coordinator, her natural instincts for three-dimensional thinking making her invaluable for interpreting enemy movement patterns. "Captain Wraith has located a major hegemony supply convoy heading for the Kepler sector." Zephyr's pulse quickened. The Kepler sector had been home to humanity's most ambitious colonial project, 3 garden worlds that had supported nearly 50 million souls before the hegemony's arrival. Intelligence suggested that the aliens were now using those same worlds as staging areas for their continued expansion into former human space. "Force composition?" asked Thaddeus Vex as he joined them near the central planning table. The former admiral had adapted remarkably to their unconventional military structure, his strategic mind proving as valuable in guerrilla warfare as it had been in conventional fleet actions. 12 heavy cruisers for supply vessels and a command dreadnought, Lyra replied, calling up detailed scanner data. "But here's the interesting part, they're carrying captured human technology. Wreckage from our colony ships, research data, even some of our people." The implications hit Zephyr like a physical blow. The hegemony wasn't just eliminating human settlements. They were studying their victims, attempting to understand the evolutionary advantages that had marked humanity as a threat. "They're trying to reverse engineer our innovations." "It won't help them," Cassius Ironwood interjected from his weapons development station. The dark-eyed engineer had become their chief of armaments, his theoretical work now backed by devastating practical results. "Human technology isn't just about the hardware, it's about the thought processes that create it. They can copy our designs but they can't copy our adaptability." Serafina Crow's image flickered to life above the communications array, her diplomatic post aboard the refugee coordination ship New Hope keeping her connected to the broader strategic picture. Zephyra, I've been analyzing hegemony behavioral patterns based on our previous engagements. They're showing signs of genuine concern for the first time in recorded history. Their expansion has slowed by 30% in sectors where we've been active. Good, Zephyr replied with cold satisfaction. Fear makes them predictable. How many ships can we commit to the Kepler operation? Vex consulted his tactical displays. 43 Reaper-class vessels are combat-ready, with full crews trained on the new systems. We could deploy 35 and keep the remainder for defensive operations. 40, Zephyr corrected. This isn't just about destroying a convoy, it's about sending a message. The galaxy needs to understand that humanity doesn't just survive. We thrive. The planning session that followed demonstrated how much they had learned since their desperate flight from Earth. Where once they had been refugees barely clinging to life, they had transformed into something unprecedented. A space-mobile civilization that treated the void itself as home. Their ships didn't need fixed bases or supply lines because they had learned to harvest everything they required from the cosmic debris fields left by the hegemony's conquests. Engagement Protocol Omega-7, Vex announced as the tactical parameters finalized. We hit them at the Kepler jump point while they're transitioning between FTL states. Their shields will be down for dimensional stabilization, and their weapons will be offline. The quantum lance arrays should punch right through their hulls, Cassius added with grim enthusiasm. And the new temporal displacement torpedoes will let us hit them before they even realize we're there. Orion looked up from his engineering station with characteristic precision. All ships report full quantum resonance integration. We could maintain combat operations for 6 months without resupply if necessary. As the fleet preparation continued around her, Zephyra found herself thinking about the irony of their situation. The hegemony had intended to prevent humanity's evolution by destroying Earth, but instead they had accelerated it beyond anything that would have been possible under normal circumstances. Faced with extinction, humans had transcended every limitation that had previously constrained them. Fleet departure in 8 hours, she announced to the assembly. Target, Kepler sector. Mission, total elimination of enemy forces and recovery of human assets. She paused, looking around at the faces of people who had been scattered refugees less than a year ago. And remember, we're not just fighting for survival anymore. We're fighting for the right to evolve without permission. The shipyard fell silent except for the hum of construction and the distant vibration of quantum resonance chambers cycling through their startup sequences. Somewhere in the darkness between stars, the most powerful empire in galactic history was about to learn that they had made a fundamental error in their calculations. They had assumed that destroying humanity's past would prevent their future. Instead, they had freed them from the constraints of their origins and unleashed something the galaxy had never seen. A species with nothing to lose and the technology to make that dangerous beyond comprehension. The hegemony convoy dropped out of hyperspace into what should have been empty void, their massive vessels decelerating from faster-than-light speeds with the ponderous majesty of orbital platforms. The command dreadnought Imperiums will lead the formation, its kilometer-long hull bristling with enough firepower to crack a moon. Behind it, 12 heavy cruisers and 4 supply vessels maintained perfect geometric alignment, their crews confident in the absolute superiority that had dominated the galaxy for millennia. They had precisely 14 seconds to enjoy that confidence before 40 human warships materialized around them like predators emerging from tall grass. Zephyra watched from the bridge of her flagship Nemesis rising as the quantum lance arrays charged to full power, reality itself seeming to hold its breath before the storm. Around her, the other Reaper-class vessels hung in space like angular sharks, their adaptive hulls shifting through configurations optimized for maximum lethality. Temporal displacement torpedoes armed and ready, reported Cassius Ironwood, his fingers dancing across weapon controls that seemed to respond to pure intention. Quantum lance arrays at optimal charge. All ships report full combat readiness. Hegemony vessels are powering weapons, added Lyra Nightingale from the pilot station, her enhanced reflexes already calculating evasion patterns through three-dimensional space. But their formation is exactly what we predicted. They still think in terms of line battles and overwhelming firepower. Thaddeus Vex leaned forward at the tactical station, his weathered features illuminated by targeting displays. 40 ships against 17. In conventional warfare we'd be outnumbered and outgunned. But we're not fighting a conventional war anymore. The command dreadnought's communication arrays crackled to life, broadcasting standard hegemony surrender demands in 17 different languages. The arrogance in that assumption, that any resistance would immediately capitulate when faced with superior force, made Zephra's jaw clench with cold fury. "This is for Earth," she whispered, and gave the order that would rewrite the balance of galactic power. "All ships, execute Omega-7. Show them what evolution looks like." The human fleet moved like a living organism, each ship perfectly coordinated with the others through quantum-entangled communication networks that operated faster than light itself. Where the hegemony vessels maneuvered like massive orbital installations, the Reaper-class warships flowed through space like liquid mercury, their forms constantly shifting to optimize for speed, stealth, or destruction. The first wave of temporal displacement torpedoes struck the hegemony convoy before the weapons had technically been fired, the exotic munitions traveling backwards through time to impact their targets at the moment of launch. 4 heavy cruisers simply ceased to exist, their matter scattered across several dimensions as temporal paradoxes tore them apart at the subatomic level. "Impossible," came the transmitted response from the hegemony command ship. "No species possesses temporal manipulation technology. No species that followed your rules," Zephra replied over open channels, her voice carrying across space with deadly calm. "But we stopped following rules when you murdered our children." The quantum lance arrays discharged in perfect synchronization, their reality-warping beams carving through hegemony shields as if they were colored light. Unlike conventional energy weapons that could be deflected or absorbed, the quantum lances attacked the fundamental forces that held matter together, turning duranium armor into expanding clouds of elementary particles. One of the supply vessels attempted to flee, its captain apparently recognizing that they faced something beyond their comprehension. Lyra Nightingale's response was to demonstrate why human pilots had become the terror of space lanes across 3 sectors. Her ship flowed through a series of impossible maneuvers, its adaptive hull cycling through configurations that let it accelerate, turn, and fire simultaneously. The fleeing vessel lasted exactly 37 seconds before quantum fire reduced it to cosmic debris. Status report, Zephra ordered as the battle continued to unfold around them. 8 enemy vessels destroyed, 5 critically damaged, Vex reported with professional satisfaction. The command dreadnought is attempting to withdraw, but their jump drives are being disrupted by our quantum interference fields. Orion Blackthorn's voice came over the ship's intercom from the engineering deck. "Commander, I'm detecting massive data transmissions from the enemy flagship. They're trying to upload combat footage to Hegemony Command." Zephra felt a moment of strategic clarity. This wasn't just about destroying another convoy, it was about sending a message that would echo across the galaxy. "Let them transmit. Make sure they get clear footage of what happens when you try to exterminate an evolutionary anomaly." The Imperium's will made its last stand with the desperate fury of a cornered predator, its massive weapons arrays firing in all directions while its shields flared under concentrated quantum lance fire. For a few moments, the ancient dreadnought managed to maintain its defensive perimeter through sheer firepower and advanced technology. Then Cassius Ironwood introduced them to humanity's latest innovation, the entropy cascade weapon. The exotic torpedo struck the Hegemony flagship and simply erased it from existence, not by destroying its matter but by accelerating the ship's personal timeline until it experienced heat death in the span of milliseconds. The kilometer-long dreadnought aged billions of years in an instant, its hull crumbling to dust as entropy claimed victory over order. In the sudden silence that followed, 40 human warships hung motionless among the debris of what had been the galaxy's most feared convoy. The battle had lasted less than 10 minutes, but its implications would reshape the balance of power for generations to come. "Search and rescue teams to the supply vessels," Zephra ordered quietly. "Any human survivors get priority medical attention. Any useful technology gets transferred to our ships. And any Hegemony crew who wants to live gets to carry a message back to their masters." As the aftermath operations began, Serafina Crow's voice crackled over the communication array from the refugee fleet. "Zephra, we're detecting massive fleet movements throughout Hegemony space. They're consolidating their forces into fortress positions. I think you've gotten their attention." Zephra stared out at the debris field that had once been the pride of an interstellar empire. "Good. Now they'll learn what it feels like to be the ones running scared." 3 years after the Kepler massacre, the war that had never been formally declared reached its inevitable crescendo at the Battle of Titan's Gate. The massive Hegemony fortress guarded the primary hyperspace route into the galactic core, its orbital platforms and defensive satellites representing the accumulated military might of 1,000 civilizations. Arrayed against it, humanity's refugee fleet had grown into something unprecedented. 500 Reaper-class warships supported by mobile construction facilities, resource processors, and the wandering cities that housed the survivors of Earth's destruction. Zephyra stood on the observation deck of the newly commissioned flagship Evolutionary Imperative, watching as her fleet prepared for what everyone understood would be the final battle. Through the massive viewports, the angular silhouettes of human warships moved with predatory grace, their adaptive hulls shifting configurations in response to tactical requirements that changed by the microsecond. Final casualty reports from the refugee census, Serafina Crow announced quietly as she approached from the communications center. The years of war had etched lines around her green eyes, but her diplomat's bearing remained unbroken. We started with 200,000 survivors. Current population, 137,412. The numbers hit Zephyr like physical blows. Each missing person represented a face, a story, an irreplaceable fragment of human culture that had been lost to the void. Dr. Elena Vasquez, who had been developing revolutionary medical techniques when her ship was destroyed during the Vega raids. Engineer Marcus Chin, whose innovations in quantum computing had died with him at the Proxima defense. Children who would never grow up to ask questions that challenged the fundamental assumptions of reality. They gave their lives so that humanity could evolve, Thaddeus Vex said from his position at the tactical displays. The former admiral had gained strategic insights that transcended conventional military thinking, his understanding of space warfare now informed by years of impossible victories. Every sacrifice brought us closer to this moment. Lyra Nightingale looked up from the pilot's coordination station, her reflexes now enhanced by direct neural interface with her ship's quantum computing systems. Hegemony Fortress is powered to maximum. They've learned enough from our previous engagements to expect unconventional tactics. Which is exactly why conventional tactics might work, Cassius Ironwood interjected with the dark humor that had sustained him through 3 years of designing increasingly exotic weapons. They're so focused on defending against temporal torpedoes and quantum lances that they might miss a simple kinetic assault. Orion Blackthorn's voice came over the intercom from the engineering decks, where he had been overseeing final preparations for their most ambitious operation yet. All ships report quantum resonance synchronization at optimal levels. The collective processing power of 500 ships should let us attempt reality manipulation on a scale that no single vessel could achieve. Zephyra moved to the central command station, where holographic displays showed the tactical situation in ruthless detail. Titan's Gate was more than just a fortress. It was a symbol of hegemony supremacy, a statement that some routes through space belonged exclusively to the empire that had maintained galactic order for millennia. Destroying it would prove that humanity had evolved beyond the constraints that limited other species. Open channels to all ships, she commanded, her voice carrying the weight of 3 years' worth of accumulated grief and determination. This is Commander Kane. Today we end the war that began with Earth's murder. Today we prove that evolution cannot be stopped by force, that consciousness cannot be constrained by fear, and that a species united by loss can achieve things that comfortable civilizations never imagine. The response came as 500 ships synchronized their quantum resonance chambers, reality itself seeming to vibrate with barely contained potential. Around the fleet, space began to exhibit properties that defied conventional physics, as if the universe itself was preparing to be rewritten by human will. Hegemony forces are launching preemptive strikes, Vex reported as massive energy beams lanced out from the fortress platforms. They're targeting our apparent command vessels. Execute dispersal pattern Omega, Zephyra ordered. The human fleet dissolved into chaos, individual ships breaking formation to pursue seemingly random vectors through three-dimensional space. To outside observers, it appeared that the refugee fleet was panicking under enemy fire. In reality, they were positioning themselves for humanity's most audacious gambit yet. All ships report optimal positioning, Lyra announced as the complex maneuver reached completion. We have quantum entanglement locks on the fortress superstructure. Initiate collective reality manipulation, Zephyr commanded. Show them what 500 evolved minds can accomplish when they work in perfect harmony. The human fleet's quantum resonance chambers synchronized completely, their combined processing power focused on a single impossible goal, convincing the universe that Titan's Gate Fortress existed in a slightly different dimensional framework than the surrounding space. The mathematical calculations required would have overwhelmed conventional computers, but human intuition guided by quantum-enhanced processing proved capable of solving problems that pure logic couldn't address. Reality shimmered around the massive fortress as fundamental forces began to operate according to new rules. Gravity vectors reversed themselves, electromagnetic fields collapsed into recursive loops, and the strong nuclear force that held atomic nuclei together suddenly became negotiable rather than absolute. The greatest fortress in galactic history simply stepped sideways out of existence, its matter displaced into dimensions that intersected with normal spacetime only in theoretical mathematics. In less than 30 seconds, the accumulated military might of 1,000 worlds had been relocated to a place where it couldn't threaten anyone ever again. "My God," whispered Serafina, staring at the empty space where Titan's Gate had been. "We didn't destroy it. We just moved it somewhere else." "Somewhere very far away," Zephyr confirmed, feeling the exhaustion that came from pushing human potential to its absolute limits. "And somewhere the hegemony will never find it again." As the implications of their victory spread through the human fleet, Zephyr allowed herself a moment of quiet satisfaction. They had proven beyond any doubt that humanity possessed capabilities that transcended anything the galaxy had previously seen. The war was effectively over. No empire could stand against opponents who could rewrite the fundamental laws of physics. But victory's price was written in the faces around her, in the empty spaces where friends and loved ones should have stood, in the knowledge that Earth would never bloom again beneath familiar stars. They had saved their species, but at a cost that would echo through generations of human memory. 10 years after the Battle of Titan's Gate, the human fleet drifted through the space between galaxies, their destination the distant spiral of Andromeda. The victory that had broken the hegemony's power had also made humanity's continued presence in the Milky Way impossible. As Zephyr had feared, their technological capabilities had evolved so far beyond galactic norms that their very existence destabilized the political balance that maintained interstellar civilization. Standing in the observation lounge of the evolutionary imperative, now serving as humanity's mobile capital, Zephyr watched through viewports that showed the vast gulf between star clusters. At 54, her hair had gone completely silver, and her eyes held the weight of decisions that had shaped the destiny of an entire species. Around her, the lights of 1,000 human vessels stretched across the cosmic void, a constellation of refugees who had become something unprecedented. Population report shows 183,000 souls, Serafina Crow announced as she joined Zephyr at the viewport. Her old friend had aged gracefully, though the years of diplomatic work with refugee species had left their mark. "We've actually grown since the exodus began. Apparently, surviving the impossible has certain biological advantages." Zephyr smiled at that. Children born in the years since Earth's destruction showed capabilities that would have been considered superhuman by previous generations. They learned faster, adapted more readily, and displayed intuitive understanding of quantum mechanics that allowed them to interface with their ship's systems as naturally as breathing. Evolution in action, compressed into the span of a single generation. "Status on the Andromeda approach vectors?" she asked. 18 months until we reach the outer spiral arms," reported Lyra Nightingale from the navigation station. Now the fleet's chief pilot, she had developed an almost supernatural ability to navigate through hyperspace using quantum probability rather than conventional star charts. Long-range scans are detecting approximately 40 billion star systems. If even a fraction support life, we'll have plenty of options for establishing our new civilization. Thaddeus Vex approached from the tactical center, his bearing still military despite having transitioned to the role of strategic advisor for their new society. "Speaking of which, we've received another delegation request from the Galactic Council. They want to discuss mutual cooperation agreements for our eventual return to the Milky Way." "Still afraid of us," Cassius Ironwood observed from his research station, where he had been developing theoretical frameworks for technologies that wouldn't be practical for another century. 3 years since the hegemony collapse, and they still don't understand that we can't go back to being what we were. Orion Blackthorne looked up from the engineering displays that showed the fleet's status in real time. His role had evolved from shipwright to architect of human space habitats, designing vessels that could support their civilization for the centuries it would take to reach their new home. "The fundamental problem is that our technology has advanced beyond their ability to comprehend. To them we're not just powerful, we're incomprehensible." Zephyr nodded, understanding the fear that drove galactic politics. Humanity had solved problems that established civilizations considered impossible, developed technologies that redefined the boundaries of physics, and demonstrated capabilities that challenged the fundamental assumptions underlying interstellar society. Their presence alone forced other species to confront the uncomfortable possibility that evolution didn't stop when you became comfortable. "Message from the Deep Scouts," Lyra announced as new data flowed across her displays. "They've detected gravitational anomalies in the Andromeda approach corridor. Something big is moving through hyperspace, heading in our general direction." The mood in the observation lounge shifted immediately from contemplative to alert. Zephyra moved to the tactical displays, where long-range sensor data painted a picture that defied conventional explanation. The anomalies were massive, far larger than any known vessel class, and their movement patterns suggested intelligence behind their course corrections. Analysis. Vex asked, his strategic mind already considering defensive options. Unknown, Lyra replied honestly. The energy signatures don't match anything in our databases. If I had to guess, I'd say we're looking at technology that makes our ships look primitive. Serafina activated the communication array, her diplomatic instincts engaged despite the uncertainty. No response to standard greeting protocols. Whatever's out there, they're not interested in talking. Cassius looked up from his theoretical calculations with an expression of dawning wonder. Commander, what if they're not aliens at all? What if they're us? The implications hit Zephyr like a physical blow. Temporal displacement? Think about it, Cassius continued, his excitement growing. We've already demonstrated limited time manipulation technology. If our descendants developed it further, if they learned to travel backwards through time itself, then we could be looking at humanity's future coming to meet its past, Orion finished, his engineering mind grasping the possibilities immediately. As if responding to their speculation, the mysterious vessels emerged from hyperspace directly ahead of the human fleet. They were beautiful and terrible, ships that seemed to be crafted from crystallized spacetime itself, their forms flowing and changing in ways that suggested perfect harmony between consciousness and reality. And on their hulls, written in flowing script that somehow conveyed meaning directly to the mind, was a single word in an evolved form of human language: welcome. Zephyra felt tears streaming down her face as she realized the truth. The refugees fleeing Earth's destruction had indeed been humanity's salvation, but not in the way anyone had imagined. They had become the seeds of a future civilization that transcended every limitation, that had learned to navigate not just space but time itself, and that had come backwards through the centuries to ensure their own existence by guiding their ancestors toward their destiny. Open channels, she commanded, her voice steady despite the emotional storm within. This is Commander Zephyr Kane of the Earth Refugee Fleet. We've been running from extinction for 10 years and apparently, we've been running toward ourselves. The response came not through communication arrays but directly into their minds, the collective voice of humanity's children speaking across the centuries. The journey begins here, among the stars between galaxies. What you plant in Andromeda will bloom into wonders that reshape the universe itself. Earth's destruction was not humanity's end, it was our true beginning. As the two fleets merged in the darkness between galaxies, past and future united in the endless dance of evolution, Zephyra understood that their suffering had not been meaningless. Every sacrifice, every loss, every impossible victory had been necessary steps in humanity's transformation from a planetary species into something that could navigate the infinite possibilities of existence itself. The stars held no limits for a people who had learned to rewrite the rules of reality. And somewhere in the vast spiral of Andromeda, the future was waiting to be born. Can you create real-life HFY alien warship sci-fi story compelling third-person story based on the title I provide? The story should follow the structure outlined below. The extraordinary adventure of Earth's refugees who built warships capable of defeating entire star empires. The story should be suspenseful, emotional, and intriguing. Use third-person narration to describe the actions and feelings of various characters. Use unique and notable names for each character. Do not reuse any names across stories, and avoid using the same common American names. Each story should feature fresh, memorable names. The story should consist of 7 parts, each part containing approximately 795 words, and the entire story should be written in paragraphs. Start the story with an engaging hook that compels the reader to continue. Introduce key characters, setting, and hint at the conflict. Conclude with a satisfying yet emotional ending in Part 7. Ensure the story resolves but leaves readers with a sense of mystery or sadness.